There is a truth that very few people know about Jim Rohn. He was not born into wealth. He did not grow up with extraordinary advantages. And he certainly did not begin life with a grand vision of becoming a global icon. Instead, he started his journey like millions of ordinary individuals, raised in a modest farming family where life was defined by hard work, responsibility, and survival rather than ambition or personal development. His early years were shaped by long days, simple living, and a clear understanding that life would not hand him opportunities easily. No one told the young Jim that he would one day influence millions of people around the world. In fact, his future seemed predictable, almost ordinary, following a path of work, bills, and routine. Yet it was precisely this ordinary beginning that quietly laid the foundation for an extraordinary transformation. As he entered adulthood, Jim Rohn was not a symbol of success.
He struggled financially, lacked direction, and believed, like many others, that working harder would eventually solve everything. He worked diligently, stayed committed, and did what society expected of a responsible man. But the results did not match the effort he invested. Money remained scarce, opportunities seemed limited, and a quiet frustration began to grow within him. This phase of life was not dramatic or glamorous. It was filled with internal questions, silent disappointments, and a deep sense of confusion about why effort alone was not producing progress. Unlike the heroic narratives often told about successful figures, his early life was marked by uncertainty rather than clarity. However, what made his story powerful was not the absence of struggle, but his willingness to reflect on it. Instead of permanently blaming circumstances, the economy, or his background, he began to ask a life-changing question. Why were some people achieving more while living under similar conditions? That question marked the beginning of an internal shift. Rather than seeing himself as a victim of circumstance, he slowly started to consider the possibility that his mindset, habits, and personal growth played a larger role than he had previously believed. Growing up on a farm had taught him the value of hard work, but it had not yet taught him the philosophy of personal development. He began to realize that working hard in the wrong direction only leads to exhaustion, not success. The deeper he reflected, the more he understood that external results are often a mirror of internal growth. His financial struggles were not just economic challenges, they were signals that something inside him needed to evolve. In those quiet moments of self-observation, without applause, recognition, or visible success, a powerful internal transformation began to take shape. He started to notice how successful individuals thought differently, how they spoke about responsibility, growth, and long-term vision. This awareness did not instantly change his life, but it planted a seed of self-responsibility that would later define his philosophy. What makes this stage of his journey so compelling for storytelling is its relatability. He was not a prodigy, not a genius, and not a man handed rare opportunities. He was a man confronting reality and choosing growth over excuses. The humility of his beginnings became his greatest strength because it gave him first-hand experience of struggle, discipline, and perseverance. Those experiences later became the emotional depth behind his teachings. Over time, he stopped asking why life was difficult and started asking who he needed to become in order to create a better life. That subtle shift in perspective marked the true beginning of his legend. Not on a stage, not in a spotlight, but in the quiet decision to improve himself day by day, even when no one was watching. There comes a moment in every transformative life when everything begins to shift, not because circumstances suddenly improve, but because perspective evolves. And for Jim Rohn, that defining moment arrived during one of the most uncertain periods of his life. At that time, he was financially struggling, emotionally drained, and directionless, despite working hard every single day. He was not lazy, Nor was he lacking determination, yet his efforts seemed disconnected from meaningful progress. Like many people, he believed that persistence alone would eventually guarantee success. However, reality repeatedly challenged that belief, pushing him into deeper reflection. The turning point came when he met his mentor, Earl Shoaff, a man whose philosophy would permanently reshape the way Jim saw himself and the world. This meeting was not dramatic in appearance, but internally it was revolutionary. Instead of offering shortcuts, financial rescue, or immediate opportunities, Earl Shoaff offered something far more valuable: a shift in mindset. He introduced Jim to a simple yet profound principle. If you want your life to change, you must change. At first, this idea was uncomfortable. It meant that the problem was not the job, the economy, or external limitations, but the current version of himself. This realization required emotional honesty and personal accountability, both of which are difficult but necessary for true growth. When Jim complained about working hard without seeing results, his mentor did not promise easier circumstances. Instead, he challenged him with a philosophy that would become legendary. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. That single statement disrupted his old beliefs and initiated a deep internal awakening. He began to understand that income rarely exceeds personal development, and that external progress is directly tied to internal growth. This encounter did not instantly transform his financial situation, but it fundamentally transformed his thinking patterns. He started reading more books, listening more carefully, writing down lessons, and consciously investing in self-education. Most importantly, he shifted from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. Rather than asking why life was unfair, he began asking how he could become more valuable, more disciplined, and more capable. This shift in questioning changed the direction of his life. The mentor did not save him, he awakened him. And that awakening led to a lifelong commitment to self-development, responsibility, and intentional growth. From that moment forward, Jim Rohn stopped viewing success as luck and began seeing it as a process of becoming. Once his mindset began to evolve, Jim Rohn did not experience instant success or overnight transformation. Instead, he entered a quiet phase of disciplined self-development where visible results were minimal but internal growth was profound. This stage is often the most overlooked in success stories, yet it is the most critical. He realized that lasting success is not built in moments of excitement, but in daily habits practiced consistently when no one is watching. Rather than relying on motivation, he began constructing a lifestyle based on discipline. He asked himself a powerful question each day: are my daily actions aligned with the person I want to become? That question reshaped how he used his time, energy, and focus. He began reading daily, even when tired. He took notes on ideas, reflected on lessons, and deliberately exposed himself to knowledge that expanded his thinking. These actions were small, quiet, and invisible to the outside world, yet they were transformative internally. At first, there were no immediate financial rewards, and this was the real test of discipline. Continuing self-improvement without instant results requires deep conviction. There were days of doubt, fatigue, and uncertainty, but instead of returning to old habits, he chose consistency. He understood that the difference between successful individuals and unsuccessful ones is not intensity, but consistency over time. Discipline became less about force and more about identity. He was no longer trying to be motivated, he was becoming a disciplined person. He also became intentional about his environment, limiting negative influences and surrounding himself with growth-oriented ideas and conversations. He recognized that environment shapes habits, and habits shape destiny. Over time, These daily disciplines strengthened his confidence, clarity, and communication skills. He practiced speaking, thinking, and expressing ideas with precision, knowing that value must be communicated effectively to create impact. Gradually, the compound effect of small habits began to reshape his character. He realized that life is not defined by a few major decisions, but by thousands of small, daily choices. Each disciplined action was like a deposit into his personal development account, generating long-term returns. This silent period of structured growth built the internal foundation that would later support his global influence. While others searched for quick success, he invested in slow, sustainable self-mastery, and that decision ultimately accelerated his long-term transformation. As years of disciplined growth accumulated, Jim Rohn gradually transitioned from a man focused on self-improvement to a figure capable of influencing and inspiring others on a massive scale. This transformation did not happen overnight, nor was it driven by fame or external validation. Instead, it emerged naturally as the result of accumulated wisdom, lived experience, and a deep understanding of human potential. He began sharing lessons informally through conversations, small talks, and practical advice grounded in real-life struggles rather than abstract theory. What made his voice powerful was authenticity. He spoke not as a distant expert, but as someone who had experienced confusion, financial hardship, and personal doubt. This authenticity created emotional resonance with audiences who saw their own lives reflected in his journey. As more people listened, his influence expanded organically. Small speaking engagements evolved into larger seminars, and his ideas began reaching wider audiences across different regions and cultures. Yet despite growing recognition, he remained grounded in his core philosophy: focus on becoming valuable rather than seeking validation. He emphasized personal responsibility, disciplined habits, and continuous growth as the true drivers of success. His speeches were not filled with empty motivation, but with practical philosophy that encouraged deep reflection and long-term change. Audiences did not just feel inspired, they felt empowered and awakened. Over time, his teachings transcended business and entered the broader realm of life philosophy, impacting entrepreneurs, leaders, and personal development seekers worldwide. His legacy grew not because he promised instant success, but because he consistently delivered timeless truths about self-development, mindset, and intentional living. Even as his global influence expanded, he never distanced himself from his humble beginnings. Instead, he often referenced his early struggles as proof that transformation is available to anyone willing to grow. This humility strengthened his credibility and deepened his connection with audiences. Ultimately, his journey from a farm boy with limited direction to a global motivational legend was not a story of luck, but a story of intentional evolution. He did not merely achieve personal success, he created a ripple effect of transformation in the lives of millions. And that is the true definition of a legend. Not someone who rises alone, but someone whose growth elevates countless others through wisdom, authenticity, and a lifelong commitment to becoming better.